Comadres, welcome to the 9th episode of Comadreando. I'm your host, Marcy. And much like the Cars, Planes, and Trains episode, I am flying solo today. When I was thinking about what topic I should cover alone, the topic of the future came up. Not like, let me look into my crystal ball and predict the future, but it's something that's been on my mind constantly since my son first got diagnosed when he was 18 months, a toddler. And it worries me now more than ever because in September, Aiden's going to be starting high school. It's also a topic that people keep bringing up. So, people are always like, oh, what are your plans? Is Aiden going to go to college? Are you going to have more children? Are you going to live with him? All these questions are good questions. And it's something that worries me. Not so much because that I fear anything bad is going to happen. It's more so that, it's unknown and it gives me anxiety too because I don't know what's going to happen really. And, thinking about it just gets me nervous. But for now, I'm taking it one day at a time and, I'm trying to be present and in the moment and enjoy the things while they're happening because, he grew up. For me, it felt like all of a sudden it was, he's 13 now and I have little videos in my phone from when he was like 1 year old or, an infant. And, the time goes by so quickly and worrying about the future is not something that I try to do, But before we go into the future, let's go back to the past. We're going to talk about the beginning when Aiden first got diagnosed. Actually, you know what? Let's go further back than that. Let's turn back the DeLorean back to when I was pregnant with my son and I first got that news that the pregnancy test came back positive and that I would be having a child. I know it's happened to other parents and a lot of my comadres and compadres out there, even for people that don't have children, you have this como una ilusión. It's an illusion, not an illusion, a dream of what your children will be like. And, you have these expectations that you have for their future. You haven't even had them and you're thinking about, what kind of personality they'll have, what kind of people they'll be in society. You think about the career choices they will make, what they're going to look like, whether they're going to get married and have a family, if they're going to, first job, their career choice, all these things you think about. And you create this, I want to call it like a piece of art. It's a piece of art because it's a dream. You fashion it of your best intentions for your child and you carry this with you the whole time. And unintentionally, as you're raising them, you're like pushing them towards that dream or that goal. And, once we got all the evaluations done and, I'm in the office, I'm with Aiden. He was actually having a hard time that day. He was so uncomfortable. He ended up falling asleep in my lap, which he never does. And I just, I'm there, like, I have him on my chest and I'm rocking him. And they're finally, reading me all the reports. And then they finally give me the diagnosis that Aiden has PDD. PDD is pervasive developmental disorder. NOS, which is not otherwise specified. So it's not pervasive developmental disorder with any other concurrences. It's just kind of like he has a developmental delay. We don't know what it is yet. So this is the diagnosis that we're giving him. And I feel like in that moment, that beautiful piece of art or, that future, fragile future was taken away from me and smashed to the ground. And I started to cry, like hysterically. I couldn't stop myself. and it was one of those cries. I don't know if my listeners or if, the people that listen to the podcast, if they've ever experienced something like that. But I remember crying like this when I was a kid, like being so hurt and crying so hard that I could not catch my breath. So it's kind of like you're like crying and you're like, like, like breathing in and crying and just kind of like really letting it all out. And I feel like I cried not because I was sad, but it was more because the fear of the unknown. You had this expectation, and then all of a sudden, this is not an option anymore. Or at least that version of the option is not an option anymore. So it was just a really hard time. And I actually went through the stages of grief. First it was denial, right? When I first started noticing the delays in Aiden, I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to get him evaluated. They're probably not going to say he has anything. It's just, he's going to need speech or something. Then I went through isolation. I didn't have anybody in the family that had a disability or any baby cousins or anything like that. So I felt very alone. And even with my family is very supportive, but we had never had anybody like I'm talking about my, what is it called? Nuclear family, right? Like my brothers, my mom and I, we've never really had experienced anybody, like working with anybody or somebody in the family with a developmental delay, right? So I felt alone. Then I went through the stage of anger. I was very angry. I was very like, why me? Why my child? It was not a good, like, not that it wasn't good. I'm not judging myself. It's more like, I was just really upset. Then the bargaining, right? Bargaining was more like trying to find where or what was the reason why Aiden all of a sudden developed, well, according to me, all of a sudden developed autism when he was hitting all the milestones. I wanted to know if it was something that I did. I was blaming myself. And then I was like trying to see if my ex-husband's family had people in his family that might have had autism. Just like some kind of explanation to try to wrap my head around the fact that, my child now has a disability, which I had no idea about before. And that his future or his childhood was going to look very different from, what I experienced and what other people have experienced. Not that everybody has similar experiences or anything like that. It was just more so, just trying to wrap my head around it. And then, after that was over, depression. And I'm going to be honest, like I was already, suffering on and off from postpartum. I don't know how long that actually lasts, but it contributed more to feeling, lonely and sad and, being in this headspace that, I don't know, like it was just, I couldn't get myself motivated, even though I had this child, who needed me. I couldn't get myself out of that, like snap myself out of that depression. And then, what really helped me during that stage was, my family. My family, they're like, oh, it's not that bad, at least he's independent somewhat and can speak even though he's not speaking how he used to speak. And he can, he's ambulatory, he can walk. And then this is, sometimes people try to make you feel better, but it's kind of like using other people's situations to make you kind of see the brighter side. So, like at least it's not this or that or whatever the case may be. And then at the end, it's acceptance. There's a shift in mindset and you stop looking at your child in a deficits-based perspective and more of a what can my kid do, and looking at those things as positives. Yeah, it was a lot. I think that the diagnosis of autism, because the evaluations are being done by professionals that are not psychiatrists, you can only, not psychiatrists, developmental psychologists, you can only really get a diagnosis of autism if you do a full, what is it called? Psychoeducation? Neuropsychological evaluation. So a neuropsychologist would go in and evaluate your kid and give them the diagnosis of autism. And then when they're that small, it's hard to do that test. So I'm guessing that in the DSM-5, I'm sure there's like some kind of, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to do a sidebar. DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So it's basically like a reference text for psychologists and psychiatrists regarding disabilities and mental disorders. So yeah, I don't know if in the DSM-5 there's some kind of age requirement to be able to diagnose somebody with autism, but I know that the symptoms of autism, the onset is 18 months to 2 years for boys, and for girls it's a little bit later on in their development. So yeah, it was a whole learning experience in leaving behind those expectations and learning my child and learning how he learns, and in that moment I felt hopeless and defeated and like I had failed him as a mother. But once I shifted my mindset from that deficit space to what can my kid do, it's like it changed. It shined a light on him. Yes, he doesn't do things how everybody does them, and he might not think the way that we think, and that's okay. He has his own little special way of doing things. An aunt of mine from my dad's side, actually, she had just gotten to know Aiden because I'm not really close to that side of the family, but she was getting to know him, and we were visiting in Dominican Republic, and while I'm there, she's telling me that I'm really blessed, and I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, Aiden is such a special child, and I know it's hard, and you're going through things that I can't understand, but God wouldn't have given him to you if he didn't feel like you were going to give this child everything that he needs to be successful. Sorry guys, I'm like getting teary-eyed, but everything he needs to be successful and to nurture him and love him the way that he needs to be loved. So I took that to heart, and yeah, like I've been going through it. It hasn't been easy. It's been hard. Some things that I talk about, like even like things as simple as, I think I touched on this in the IEP episode with Mo. Things as simple as eating. He wasn't able to chew and swallow before. He wasn't able to chew even though he had teeth. So when he first got diagnosed in early intervention, that he got the IFSP, he had speech and feeding. So they had to teach him how to chew and do all these massages and give him a chewy tube to learn how to eat. And now I have to stop him because he eats so much and he eats independently. He can feed himself. Another thing that we struggled with was a lot of behavior issues when he was small. I feel like, and this is not just kids with special needs, I feel like toddlers especially try to manipulate you and but like for kids, for at least for Aiden, it was extreme. So he would tantrum But it wouldn't be a regular tantrum. It was like he would throw himself on the floor, and it didn't matter where we were at. I forgot what it was. We were walking somewhere, and he wanted to stop for something. I can't remember for the life of me what it could have been. But I was with his ABA therapist, who ABA is Applied Behavior Analysis. It's a therapy that they use for children with developmental disorders to help them learn behaviors that are more appropriate, socially appropriate than what they're using to cope. So that was one of the goals, like having him follow directions and not tantrums. So Mr. Aiden used to throw himself on the floor in the middle of the street and cry, to the point that I would have to stop what I was doing, and handle the situation. So his ABA therapist at the time, Isabel, she told me, Marcia, he knows that if he cries, you're going to stop and he's going to get his way and you're going to give in. So I need you to keep walking. And I'm looking at her like she's crazy. I'm just like, how am I going to leave my toddler in the middle of the street? She's like, just go out. We'll be back here. Just keep walking. So Aiden's on the floor crying, kicking his feet, pulling his hair, boogers, tears, everything on the floor. And I'm walking. As I'm walking, I'm emotional. I'm like slightly crying, and I keep looking back, and he's still crying and still on the floor. And it comes a point that I was like, I want to say like 20 steps away. And Mr. Aiden gets up, wipes his little tears, and starts running after me. So, after that, like I knew that even though he wasn't communicating with me how I needed to, he understood a lot of things. And just because he had a disability doesn't mean that he doesn't comprehend certain things. So yeah, after that, no more tantrums. Well, not no more tantrums, but I knew what to do. I had a plan of action. What else was? Oh, okay. Another thing that was really bad and then got better was going to the barber shop. He would, when he first got a haircut, which was when he turned 1, there was no issue because he was basically a baby. The onset of autism hadn't happened yet, and it was fine. But once his dad and I separated, he was about a year and a couple of months. I had to take him to the barbershop by myself, and that's when I started noticing, like, the aversion to being there. Barbershops are overstimulating in general, especially here in the Heights. Everybody's loud, telling stories, drinking sometimes, depending on the time of day you go, smoking hookah. There's loud music, it's a lot of things that, if you think about it from their perspective, is overwhelming and can be too much sensory input for them. So, that I had to start, I got in contact with his barber, and he started coming to the house to cut his hair. And that went on for about 6 months. Then finally the barber was like, there was a day he couldn't come, and he was like, bring him to the shop. I'll make sure that it's okay. So, I went in the morning. It was pretty quiet, and, I had to sit with him and put him between my legs, and the guy's cutting his hair. I'm stressed out because there's other people there, and they're looking at me and him. I'm stressed out, and I don't know, but I guess when I get stressed out, I start sweating. And it's not like a little glisten. It's not like I'm glowy. No, it's like sweat. And Aiden's crying, and I'm like anxious, and then I'm sweating, and I'm holding him. I'm like, holding him so he won't run away. And like the guy's trying to cut his hair as fast as possible. And by the time I left the barbershop, I was full of hair. He was full of hair. It was just not a pretty sight. And then fast forward to now, the other day, I was commenting online that he was able to go to the shop and he didn't need his phone. He was able to sit and wait for the barber and, wait his turn, get in the chair, not use the device, watch while the barber was like cutting his hair, say thank you, and like actually like take turns in the conversation. Like the barber would ask him how he was doing and he responded, and then he said something else to the barber. And we're still working on that conversation piece because he doesn't initiate conversations independently. He'll respond if you ask him a question, but for it to come from him to like socialize with you, we're still working on that. So, going from, me holding him down for him to get a haircut to being able to be independent without a phone or a device to cut his hair is like night and day. And I look at those situations like, I still see that he has a lot to work on to get as close to his typically developing peers as possible. But I do see the how he has grown in leaps and bounds. And I really am so fortunate to have had the people that we have had in his life that have worked with him, the teachers and the occupational therapists and the physical therapists and the speech people. It's been really amazing, like everything that he's been going through and how he has gotten better. What else? Oh, you can go to the supermarket now and he basically tells you, enter the restaurants, and he'll tell you exactly what he wants. That's one thing. Aiden definitely is very decided and he knows what he likes. So he'll go to the supermarket and he'll ask for all the things that he likes. If I say no, he's okay with that now. Before, not so much. He goes to the restaurants and he knows exactly what he wants to order. It's been a work in progress. It does get better. So for me, the plans for high school for Aiden, I'm seeing how it's going. He's way better than he has ever been. And I intend for him to go to the high school that's linked to the school that he's at right now. The school's phenomenal. It's actually District 75. And he got placed right before he went to junior high school. He got placed in a 12 to 1 to 1 classroom, which is 12 students, 1 adult and 1 assistant teacher. And he's been doing so great. And his little personality is shining. With respect to college, I don't know if the traditional college experience is for him yet, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I want to say that if in my heart of hearts, I wish he can go to some kind of media program where he can embrace his little gifts and the talents that he has. I've spoken before on the show about his little superpower, which is audio editing. He's so good at creating content. I actually have been thinking about opening a YouTube for him where he puts on his videos. So what he's into right now is taking audio from one show and finding appropriate video from another show and essentially dubbing the episode with the audio from the other show. So basically, like, he watches this on YouTube all the time. So he'll watch Yo Gabba Gabba with the audio from Backyardigans or something like that, or Sesame Street audio with something else. So he that's his creative thing. He loves to do that, and he basically taught himself. So I see a future with him in audio engineering. If I would essentially be able to send him to a school that he can learn this, vocational school or something, I would love that for him. Another career that I've thought about for him in college is voice acting. He is really, he is phenomenal at remembering stories and retelling them using voices and changing the voices for all the characters. He's very animated, and he has an amazing memory. He will remember the text to repeat, or the script, and like basically repeat it verbatim. I spoke on this on the Left Hand Perspectives podcast. He has favorite stories that he knows from the first page to the very last page, and he'll tell them to you verbatim. So some of the stories that he loves is one of them is Click Clack Moo by oh my god, what is the name of it? Okay, I'll put the link to the story in the show notes. Click Clack Moo he loves Dr. Seuss books, even though Dr. Seuss is now controversial, but his favorite book is The Cat in the Hat, and he knows that front to back. What else? Those are like the top two that he knows, and he is so good at reading with expression. He's hyperlexic, so he can read way past his grade level. Comprehension's not all the way there just yet, but yeah, like those are the careers that I've thought about for him. He's also really good with animals, so maybe a veterinarian. We don't know, but I'm not. I say that to say this. I am not placing my expectations on my child. I'm letting him be him and accepting him for who he is. Another question that people ask me is that, what are my plans for the future once Aiden becomes an adult? In a perfect scenario, Aiden will be independent and will be living on his own with his own family eventually. And if that happens, I'm okay. And if it doesn't happen, I'm okay as well. But for now, if he's still the way he is now, I foresee me maybe buying a mother-daughter house in the future and moving in, both of us living in the same house, even though he'll have his own space and his own apartment, living together. If he's able to be independent, or if he's not, he can, live with me. But like, I essentially want him to live with me. I want him to be able to have his own space, so he doesn't feel like I'm intruding or, not having boundaries with him, because he is growing. He's 13 right now. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but developmentally, Aiden's 13 chronologically. Developmentally, however, he has a 33% delay, which if we calculate that will land him at about 9 years old. So it makes sense by the way he functions and, the things that he does. Even though his body is developing and he's prepubescent or actually going through puberty right now, developmentally he's not there. So, I think about the future kind of like that. Like, he's 21, quote unquote, but how old will he be developmentally? And, I'll go by that. So yeah, the plans are, if he goes away to college, I'm going to be traveling, investing in property, having fun, kind of living out my 20s as an older person. Well, not as crazy as 20, but, there was a tweet that I wanted to share with all of you. And the gist of the tweet was that your kids are not your property, and that putting these expectations on them actually does more harm than good, because if they don't live up to those expectations, it can have effects on them in the long run. And I feel like I'm in total agreement with that. Another question people ask me is since he's already 13, he's gonna be a teenager. Well, he is a teenager. Will I have more kids? And the answer to that is I don't know. If I find someone that I end up with a partner that doesn't have children, for me, it's like starting over again. I have a child that's completely very independent. All I have to do is give him verbal reminders, and then I would go back to changing diapers and going through motherhood again. And I love children. That's why I'm a teacher, but I like giving them back as well. So I don't know. That the answer to that is I don't know. Of course, I've dreamed about having a little girl with my curls, a carbon copy of me running around, doing the most, being sassy. But I'm still working through certain traumas that I have from when Aiden first got diagnosed, not necessarily with him, but things that I read. I read a lot of research that said that the propensity or the likelihood of parents with kids with special needs, especially with autism, to have a second child with the same disability is very high. And, I want to be responsible. Not that it's irresponsible to have children after you have a child with special needs, but I don't know. It's something that sometimes I feel like yes, and sometimes I feel like no. Also, my window for that is closing, I think. I'm 38 years old. I want to be one of these moms pushing a stroller and I have a head full of white hair. But yeah, like the answer to that is I don't know. But, my plans are not that traveling, like you can be inhibited to travel if you have a baby, but, I just think about like that time when I was pregnant. I was reading all those books, what to expect when you're expecting. And it was pretty nightmarish for me because honestly, like I know it's the reality. All these things can happen, but I would open up a chapter and it's like, oh, hey, your baby's the size of a cantaloupe, but also all these things can go wrong. And it was scary. To me, it was scary. I don't know if other people feel like that out there. Definitely send me a Comadre-Gram to let me know how you felt about reading that book when you were pregnant, or, if you're the partner, while your significant other was pregnant. It was not a good look. But yeah, no, I don't really know if the genetics for autism are coming from my side of the family or his dad's side of the family. Granted, I wouldn't be having a child with the same person, but it's a gamble and I'm not a gambling person. So that is the answer to that for now. I might change my mind, who knows, and then people ask me career-wise, what do I want to do? Yes, I teach right now, but after the pandemic, it has taken me a lot to process everything, especially how teachers were treated at the beginning. Like everybody's like, oh my God, heroes, yes, teachers, oh my God, we can't believe you do this. And then towards the end that, they're trying to reopen everything back up and bring us back in the classrooms. Basically, parents are like, these teachers, they're just getting paid right now to just be in their house and, whatever. Mind you, we're teaching the kids. It's just because we're not in the building doesn't mean we're not working. We were doing it remotely. So, like the pandemic has put everything into perspective and made me prioritize things that are of importance. And I do love teaching, but I like my mental health more. And, I want to be able, like, I love my job, but I feel like I could be doing more and affecting greater change in the community in a different way. What way is that? I don't know. I don't have all the answers right now. I'm not perfect. I'm human. Obviously, I wouldn't leave the Department of Education before I have another career secured. But right now, I'm studying programming and looking at computer science and things like that, things that I'm interested in, to see how I can, hone the sword, just like improve my skills and give myself workable skills in other career fields. I remember when, and I spoke about this before, I remember when I was working corporate, I was very unhappy. I was burnt out. I had been working 4 years already in corporate banking, not corporate banking, but retail banking. And I used to wake up and I hated my job. I loved working with the customers. The customers were great. Like, dealing with people is not easy, but the variety and the newness, like every day was different. It wasn't like monotonous and you're just sitting there in front of a desk shoveling papers, which I have done before. It was very different, but it got to a point I couldn't drink the Kool-Aid anymore. And that's when I decided to change careers and become a teacher. And now, almost 40, and I'm thinking about doing other things, or how I can use this education that I have and the things that I know and that I've learned to better help my community. I was thinking about affecting change, like in educational policies, or just basically trying to see how we can change the system of education, which, by the way, public education was implemented in the 1800s, and it's the same model still. And I feel like that doesn't work anymore, because the jobs are different, where people are not going to school to become factory workers. People are not going to school to become blue-collar workers. It's we're supposed to be preparing children for these jobs that don't exist right now. If you would have told me that somebody was going to have a job working at Meta doing programming when I was 6 years old, I would have been like, what is that? What do you mean? So there's a lot of jobs that exist now that did not exist 30-something years ago. And going into the future, when our children are older, there are jobs that are going to exist that didn't exist now. So it is our responsibility to prepare these children for these jobs. And in order to prepare them for the jobs, we need to nurture creativity. We need to nurture, exploration. We need to nurture questioning, which the system of education right now, the way that it's set up, it's not for people to think independently. So, affecting change in that way and helping revamp the entire system of education, because it's not serving our children correctly, if I'm completely honest. Unless you have a parent that is like really on it and helping their children and really present, there's things that don't, there's some skills or things that are lacking in the education of your child. Plus, remember, the teacher can do so much. We have other children in the classroom, and it's not just your kid. So definitely, I was looking at the proposal from the new mayor, and he was proposing, longer school days, having Saturday classes, a longer school year. And I'm all for that, but that would work when we shift the change with respect to the field of education, and give teachers the respect that they deserve as professionals, and change everything from the ground up. It can't just be like certain changes here and there. Like I can see how in the long run it can have better results, but definitely re-looking at the system of education in the country. And with that, I wanted to touch on a couple of Comadre-Grams that I received. The first one is from my friend Franny. Shout out to Franny. She is an avid listener. And I asked her regarding the topic, like how she felt about it, about the future, what worried her, or what were her things that she wanted to talk about. And she said, I think when they are in this adolescence age, there is this safety of knowing you're the guardian and supplier of all their needs. I think one thing I think about when it comes to the future is independence, which we're in agreement about, right? Are we considering, she's saying her and her husband, we're considering purchasing a larger home in case our boys need to stay with us long term? What if they're always going to need us? Question mark. I'm mentally prepared to do it, but hopeful that there's a place for them in this world. And I feel like part of my work that I'm doing now is helping to create that inclusive environment for these children. You know, I want to say, well, you know what? Let me get to the other Comadre-Gram and then I'll touch on what I was going to say right now. And then another Comadre-Gram that I got from Yadi. Shout out to Yadi, who's also an avid listener. She has questions, which is like, what happens after high school? You know, transitioning to the adult world. You know, what happens? I feel like that's something I would most likely bring an expert about that, maybe a counselor that works with children with special needs, to see what it is that happens. Because right now I don't even know what happens after high school, you know. She also is worried about the transition to independence and being out in the community. Like, how will they be received? Another question she has is how to deal with law enforcement. And just a heads up, comadres, I'm actually going to interview a friend of mine that's a police officer and kind of pick his brain about procedure. And maybe we can get tips from him on how to keep our children safe. Because I know I touched on this on a couple of episodes ago. It's like, how do they deal with people that have special needs if there's some kind of, if the police are called on them, and how do they respond? So those are all such great questions. So the thing that I was going to end with, sort of, this is the last thing that we're going to talk about before we end the episode, is creating inclusive environments starts with us. So for me, I love children with special needs, and I feel like, you know, I'm very tolerant of them. Not tolerant. I love them. Like, I accept them for who they are, little quirks and all, everything. Like, absolutely, this is why I chose the field that I chose. I felt I had to analyze myself, because these children grow up and they become adults. And these adults don't have to disclose their disabilities with you. So being very cognizant of that as you operate, you know, when you interact with other people, because it's so easy to judge and have these expectations of behavior for other adults based on, you know, what you think people should behave like, or what they should say and how they should be. But these kids, they become adults. And I had to check myself. I honestly had to sit down and check myself, because there was a person when I used to work corporate that was a little awkward, and it was a customer. They would come in and they only wanted to see me every single time. And, you know, I would be with other customers and they would wait. I would have a wait list, and he would wait until I was available, because he did not feel comfortable sitting with other people, you know. And I would get annoyed. I'm like, you know what? You know, I've been working back to back with customers the whole time. I was a banker at the time. So, you know, I'm exhausted. And then this person is like coming in, and then it was kind of like, you know, they're already antsy and edgy and dealing with other people. and they come to me and they're, unloading on me. And then I had to sit with that, and I'm like, why is it that it's bothering me? And then I started thinking, I was like, after I became a teacher, I'm like, wow, this person might have had a disability, and I'm, my gut reaction was like kind of like annoyance and being upset. But, to be able to create those inclusive environments, we also need to think about those adults with special needs. And after like I thought about that, because Aiden is getting older, I try to prepare my students for the future, and they're going to be adults, and we have to have them be ready to interact with society, but also be tolerant of people that are not, quote unquote, don't fit the mold, or are, march to the beat of their own drum. They don't follow the society's, quote unquote, norms for behavior, or, responses and things like that. I actually worked with somebody that had Asperger's. She didn't tell me she did, but, now I have they call it queer eye, right? For other men who, not men, but people that are queer, they can recognize other people that are, right? I have the special education eye now, because I've been working 8+ years with people with special needs, young and old. And, the teacher never disclosed to me that she had Asperger's. But based on behaviors and, the awkward social interactions, and she would try to make conversation, and, I would find myself being a little, annoyed, because like she would pick moments when I'm like, I have a lot of things to do. But once like I thought about it, and I was like, oh, it helped me interact with her in a more, open way, and understand where she was coming from, because she would get a lot of anxiety when things would change, and things would be thrown on her plate last minute. So, it helped me work with her in a better way, and it created a better team at the end, when you think about it that way. Unfortunately, the administration we had in the building was not so tolerant of her, and actually picked on her, which is another topic for another day. But yeah, to the point that she actually had to leave the school where she was at, because she didn't feel supported by administration. But it starts with you, as parents of children with special needs, as family members of children with special needs, as people that interact with people with special needs on a daily basis, whether you know it or not. We need to have kindness at the forefront, and operate from a space of love and forgiveness and acceptance more than anything. And with that, comadres, I hope that, I have been able to help some parents that had some reservations about their children's development. And thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate it. And for the people that listen, and the other people that know that this is my area of expertise, thank you for the referrals as well. Like, I love helping people, and if I can provide at least one resource or teach somebody one thing, I feel like I've done my job. I want to close the episode saying what I always say, which is follow me at Comadreando Pod on Instagram. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to send me a Comadre-Gram via email at comadreando@escthenetwork.com, or DM me. Remember, I am here. I am your comadre. I can provide resources. I can be a listening ear. I am here. I know I didn't have this when my son was small, but this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create a community. I want to say, I want to give a shout out to the New York City Special Education Parents Group that I'm part of on WhatsApp. You ladies are amazing. Yadi's also part of that group. I'm actually going to see if I can have them on for an episode, which would be amazing. But yeah, so you guys know how to reach me, and have a great evening. Thank you for spending time with your comadre. I will see you guys soon. Bye.